Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And it's been a busy week for the royals.
Yeah, another busy week. It feels like the royals are virtually the only show in town in terms of celebrity news at the moment.
I know, they're definitely making the most of the spotlight as well. We thought it would be a quiet week this week, so obviously we got some unexpected bombshell news on the Sussex front.
I was so surprised to hear this. We had thought, like, after they made that final Sussex Royal Instagram post, we weren't going to hear from them for, 4 or 5 months maybe. And then we get this big report on their new non-profit. The Telegraph had done some digging and discovered trademark applications for Harry and Meghan's new non-profit under the name Archewell? Archewell?
Archewell?
No.
Yeah, the pronunciation is still TBD.
Arche.
Archi.
Well, you studied classics, so tell me, what does it mean and how am I supposed to say it?
Well, the name, according to Harry and Meghan, comes from 2 words. One is well, meaning where we would all draw our support and sustenance from. The other is a Greek word, arche. That's, I think, how the ancient Greeks would pronounce it.
Is it?
And it means source of action. Before we go any further with it, we should mention that Harry and Meghan were not intending to announce Archewell to the world. They said, like you, our focus is on supporting efforts to tackle the global COVID-19 pandemic. But faced with this information coming to light, we felt compelled to share the story of how this came to be.
Yeah, so the Telegraph's royal correspondent Hannah Furness pointed out in the piece and again on Twitter that they hadn't wanted to reveal the name yet, but after the Telegraph approached them and said, we've found this trademark application, they kindly agreed to explain why they had chosen the name, and they released quite a long statement from the 2 of them.
Yeah, they said, before Sussex Royal came the idea of arche, the Greek word meaning source of action. We connected to this concept for the charitable organisation we hope to build one day, and it became the inspiration for our son's name. To do something of meaning, to do something that matters. Archewell is a name that combines an ancient word for strength and action and another that evokes the deep resources we must each draw upon. We look forward to launching Archewell when the time is right.
I'm just so shocked by this. I really wasn't expecting to hear any more about this for ages, and I felt like it was very unusual that they said they felt compelled to share this story. I feel like we've talked about this before, where they often feel compelled to react to stories in the media, whether in the tabloid press or in broadsheet papers like the Telegraph. And I kind of wish they would have just held on and let the Telegraph run this story about the trademark without giving any explanation and then launching the actual thing when they were ready to do it. What do you think?
I mean, I can definitely see the argument for them just kind of sucking it up and putting up with that kind of coverage, but it's just so similar to what we saw with the Sussex Royal stuff that suddenly there were all these pieces about how they were going to be branding t-shirts and baby bibs and all of these kind of things. It just went on for so long. I can understand why they would want to get ahead of this, to try and give some parameters to what's going on and to say this isn't how we wanted it to come out.
I can understand that too, but I also don't think it was the right move. And I feel like there's still this confusion over what this charitable organisation is going to be. And, they made it quite clear that they weren't going to be starting the Sussex Royal Foundation, that they weren't interested in doing a foundation like the Royal Foundation, that they wanted to do their own thing that was going to be very different. And I am not clear on what this is. And I kind of wish we could have seen it when they were ready to tell us all about it. So it would be much more clear to us what this is, what they're going to be doing, and what it all actually means. And, the name, I think, is an interesting story. The fact that that's where Archie's name comes from, and that this is something that they've been thinking about for a while, and it's not like they scrambled to find something after they couldn't use Sussex Royal. So I think it's just like a little bit complicated, and I really hope they do like stop being so reactive to the media, because it just continues to flare or to fuel this idea that they're in a feud with the media and they're going back and forth the whole time.
Yeah. Do you like the name?
Initially, I was not into it. I don't like that I don't know how to pronounce it. And I feel quite self-conscious every time I say it because I feel like I'm saying it wrong. But it's so Megan.
Yeah.
It's super, super Megan, super Tig-ish.
I'm really into it. I love that I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. I think it's going to be Archewell. I'm trying to imagine it in Megan's voice and like how it's going to sound. And I think that's more likely than having like a hard k sound.
Yeah, but the Archewell is a little bit dissonant to me. Like it'd be smoother if it was just Archewell.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think either I'd be delighted with.
I'm sure anything in Megan's voice is going to sound nice, but
yeah,
in my own voice, it's not pleasant to my ears.
I like the story of it. I like this idea that they had this concept that they like came across and were like this source of action. We love that. And that then when it came to naming Archie, they were like, this is what we want for him.
So, as I said, we don't know what it's going to be yet, but the Telegraph had a lot of speculation based on what was in the documents, the legal documents. So they reported that the ambitious plans include organising and conducting support groups for persons in need, including emotional counselling and coordinating social, personal care and psychological services. They also said that they could build a website in the field of nutrition, general health and mental health, along with coordinating counselling services and mental health therapy. I think this raised people's hackles a little bit, that people were thinking, oh, Megan thinks she can come out and counsel people and she can do a goopy nutrition website with all her pseudoscience.
I mean, we know she can do a goopy pseudoscience website if she wants to, but...
Well, no, I think with Goop, you know, there have been legitimate medical concerns about the advice that she has published on that website, and that they have had to change a lot of the advice they've given, whereas Megan's is just very mild kind of general lifestyle stuff. But I think people were thinking, oh, here's Megan going full Goop, but I don't think they're going to do anything similar to that, because they were again very quick on the draw to deny it. A spokesperson for Meghan and Harry spoke to Harper's Bazaar, among other places, saying that they are not planning to do the support groups or the nutrition lifestyle website, that those aspects had been a little bit exaggerated, and they reiterated that they look forward to launching Archewell when the time is right.
So we don't really know what's going on, because with all of these trademark applications, so much of it is protective and just to make sure that people don't start making, for example, paper clips.
The paper clips keep being mentioned. I'm dying to see these Meghan Markle, Prince Harry paper clips.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just generally very interested in the branding that's going to come out for this. And I think I might have a stab at it myself. Just put my hat in the ring.
There's so many facets here they have to navigate in terms of avoiding it looking too much like the Sussex Royal stuff, avoiding it looking like the Royal Foundation. You don't want it to look like the Prince's Trust. You want to avoid it looking like any other royal charitable organisation. You don't want it to look like the TIG either. So there's so many politics around the colours they can choose, the fonts they can choose.
But the t-shirts need to look so good. That is the main thing, I think.
They were, of course, criticised for this. They were seen to be announcing their new organisation at the same time as the Prime Minister Boris Johnson had gone into intensive care, which is just so unfortunate because, you know...
So you didn't get to hear the announcement, which you've been so looking forward to.
He is doing better now. He's no longer in intensive care. But at the time, it was this massive worldwide news story. Everybody was so shocked by this. And then to have Meghan and Harry piping up about Archewell on the bottom of the front page was just such unfortunate timing. But the Telegraph reporter Hannah Furness did point out that this was all written before the news about Boris going into the ICU. However, of course, that didn't stop all of the criticisms from rolling in like clockwork.
Probably looking back, the smartest thing would have been for them to say nothing. But looking forward with the Sussexes, apparently Harry is going to appear in a National Geographic documentary about Jane Goodall, the primatologist that he interviewed for Vogue, in just a couple of weeks' time.
This is very exciting. So we know that they have a bit of a relationship. They obviously had that interview in British Vogue, and then as well as that, Harry attended her Roots and Shoots initiative event.
Oh, and they did the dance.
Yeah. But Jane Goodall has done an interview with the Daily Mail to talk about the new documentary that's coming out. And in part of the interview, she talked about that interview with Harry in Windsor, and she recalled meeting Meghan and Archie after the interview was done. And she said, "I made Archie do the Queen's wave, saying, I suppose he'll have to learn this." Harry said, "No, he's not growing up like that." Oh, I love that.
So good. I mean, he's really not growing up like that. He's enjoying the California sun.
I know, this was 6 months before they announced that they were going to be stepping down, and already he was like, fuck no. None of this royal wave nonsense.
Way. But far from the California sun, back in the UK, the Cambridges have been upping their social media game.
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for a few weeks now, but we may have some more information on what is driving it. So we saw this week that Digital Dave, who you may remember as the social media manager or the digital communications lead for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, is now working for Prince William and Kate Middleton. We learned this from his LinkedIn account, where he updated it to say he is now digital communications and social media for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as of April 2020. So he's a month in the job and he is on a roll, I would have to say.
Yeah, he's been doing very well.
Oh, and he's Irish.
Fantastic, even better.
He went to UCD, which is one of the top universities in Ireland.
So this obviously follows on from the fact that Sarah Latham, who's Harry and Meghan's former PR guru, was hired by the Queen to work on special projects. This is someone that we, at the time, were told was too much of a lefty, too American, and definitely too unroyal to work for royals like Harry and Meghan.
Because now, she had worked for the Clintons.
Yeah, and now she's literally got a job with the top dog.
The Queen goes total American pure big shot.
Yeah.
I do think it's so interesting though, because so much of the stories around Harry and Meghan leaving was about how they were like cruelly letting go their 14 or 15 staff members, and how they weren't going to be rehired by any members of the royal family, and they were just basically out on their arse and had no prospects ever again in life because of Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
But clearly the other members of the royal family are realising that the people that Harry and Meghan had picked to work with them are actually
really good.
Very valuable. So reading a little bit about David Watkins, the new social media guy, he is said to have spearheaded the clap for carers video of Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis that we were raving about a couple of weeks ago.
That was really good. Such a good move.
And so different from what we'd seen before from the Cambridges.
Yeah. Even
if the video quality left something to be desired. And I have to say, it would make a lot of sense if he was involved in their most recent video, the Instagram TV video of Kate and Will on a Zoom call with students at the Casterton Primary Academy in Lancashire this week. Yeah,
this was so incredibly wholesome. They were talking to the teachers at the school who are helping to look after the children of key workers in the frontline services. So that's including NHS and social care, as well as supermarket staff and delivery drivers. Schools are closed here apart from for kids of essential workers. So it was great to see Will and Kate talking to these kids, asking them how they felt about still being in school and everybody else was off. And there was a great energy to this call, I thought.
Yeah, it was very cute. I mean, some of the things I loved Kate's yellow jumper from Zara. I loved her hair. I loved the way it looked like she did her own makeup. I loved that the little username was DOC. That was so good. And it really showcased how strong they are when, particularly Kate, when she's talking to children. Yeah. So you had a really good showcase for that. And Will, I think, came across really well too. I thought there was a really sweet moment where the kids they were speaking to put on these little bunny ears, and Will was like,
"That's a strong look."
Yeah,
which was nice.
He also said, "I like your bunny ears. They look like the real deal." The kids asked them questions as well, which was cute. They were asked, "Who's the best famous person you've met?" Kate had a really good answer, I thought. She said Prince George has been watching lots of David Attenborough's Blue Planet, so that would probably be her favourite. I think that's quite a good answer. It's educational as well as being somebody that adults will be like, yes, David Attenborough.
Oh, yeah. It's a very smart choice because obviously David Attenborough is somebody who has done a lot of work and has a relationship with the royal family, and he is much older than, you know, she's met Beyonce, she's met Reese Witherspoon, she's met tons of famous people. He's a very unflashy, like a total like national treasure. He's like the one that people of any age would be like, yeah, good choice.
I've never, ever, ever heard anyone say, oh, I can't stand David Attenborough.
I really didn't like, though, that Will said his favourite people weren't actually famous.
That's not the question.
Get a grip. Say Mary Berry. Equally, you can get a win with that one.
But he also had a quite disappointing answer to another question. A kid who was talking about William the Conqueror. He was saying the first William was called William the Conqueror. What do you want to be called in 1,000 years' time? And Will said he couldn't think of an answer to that.
I mean, does anybody think these two are going to be very good at when they're being put on the spot?
No.
I couldn't come up with a good answer to that.
I don't think you need a good answer, though. You just need, like, something kind of banal, but rather than just avoiding the question. But, you know, I don't think the kids are as harsh on them as I am. So they
he did get in trouble for speaking off the cuff about coronavirus on his Ireland tour. So maybe he's just trying to stay on script for the time being.
Which is smart.
Yeah, so this was a great video. Huge success. We loved it. But I was very fascinated by the coverage of their new social media hire, because obviously we're very excited to have this Irishman, this former Sussex staffer working for them. Thought it would be a good news story, but Lainey Gossip pointed out that there was something unusual in the coverage of the Digital Dave story on People magazine. She pointed out that many outlets had cited People in their reports on the hiring of Digital Dave, but when you click through the link to go to the original People story, the actual story has changed. And if you look at the URL, so the slug after the URL is people.com/royals/Kate Middleton and Prince William hire Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's social media manager. But the headline of the story is how Kate Middleton and Prince William are using social media to connect during coronavirus. And then if you do Control F or if you just read the story, there is no mention of David Watkins or of any new social media manager in the copy at all, which suggests that something has been changed.
So Lainey says, People, of course, has never been unfavourable towards Harry and Meghan, but it's not like they're in the business of taking sides either, and certainly not against the Cambridges. Did they change their story because they didn't want to be seen as suggesting that the Cambridges were poaching from the Sussexes? Were they asked to change the story? Why can't I find a mention of David Watkins at people.com? This is not nothing. When shit like this gets updated, there's always a reason.
So what is the reason? Like, obviously this is now being reported everywhere that David Watkins is working for.
Yeah, it's not a secret.
Yeah, and it's on his own LinkedIn.
Yeah, you can verify it, yeah. But
it is very interesting that the story might have been changed from that angle, and it suggests to me that, maybe the Cambridge team are sensitive about the theory around the Instagram rivalry between Kensington Royal and Sussex Royal that was reported in the New York Times last month. Perhaps they're eager to shut down any speculation around social media strategy and follower numbers and competition between the two at all, and they don't want to be seen maybe as poaching from Harry and Meghan's team.
Yeah, I mean, I do buy into that, but I also think there could be a non-Sussex related reason that maybe they don't want people to think that their new social media endeavours are entirely down to one new person joining their team and having all these great ideas. Maybe they want it to seem more like these ideas are coming naturally from Will and Kate or from more general discussions.
I guess we'll see as it goes on. Obviously, Meghan was a real social media pro herself, so it's not all up to the social media manager. You have to have some input from the people behind the account as well.
But a social media manager isn't the only thing people are claiming the Cambridges stole this week.
Yeah, there was such anger in the royal fandom over this. I mean, let's just lay out the facts here. So, Hello Magazine had a report on Prince William and Kate Middleton's incredible new project, which is based around a trademark application and a patent that Hello found that was taken out this week called HeadFit, which, judging by the details of the application, is likely to be a mobile app. So, Hello talks about how Will and Kate are interested in mental health and that's expected to be the focus of the project. But then they don't mention anywhere in the story is Prince Harry. And a lot of Sussex stans remembered that Prince Harry had launched something called HeadFit last year with the Ministry of Defence. And it was part of Heads Together, the mental health initiative that the Royal Foundation did under Harry, Will, and Kate, and Meghan.
Yeah, so the first time HeadFit came to our attention was back in October. The head of research and clinical innovation at the UK's Defence Medical Services tweeted that HeadFit would be an innovational mental fitness video signposting website to assist the management of good mental health. So this is armed forces related, it's mental health related. Makes total sense for Harry to be involved in this at an early stage. This tweet also said, launch anticipated early 2020. I mean, I don't think it's early 2020 anymore, but I guess all the royals had bigger things to be thinking about earlier in the year. But the timeline does make sense that this is, going to be coming out soon.
So the question was, did Harry do all the work and now the Cambridges get the credit for this project, HeadFit, even though we don't really know what HeadFit is yet?
I think it's a bit premature to be saying things like they're taking all the credit because they haven't officially announced anything about this. This is, again, another story that has been made out of noticing a trademark application. It hasn't given the Cambridges a chance to talk about what's going on. You never know who is going to be talked about when it does get officially launched.
Yeah, you'd hope that when they do get around to making any kind of statement around HeadFit or launching it, that they would acknowledge Prince Harry's involvement earlier in the project. But, this is just the way things are going to be now because Harry is not part of the working royals anymore, and things that he worked on as a royal will have to go to other people. If I'm in the Ministry of Defence, I'm going to want a senior working royal as my face of my project. As much as I maybe enjoy working with Prince Harry, I understand the benefit to my organisation to have someone who is a working member of the royal family. And so of course you're going to be delighted if you have Prince William or Kate Middleton filling in that role. And this is just how it works with the divorce, this big royal divorce. Harry's not going to get to keep all the things that he worked on, and it sucks, and I wish it didn't have to end up like this, but unfortunately for everyone involved, it looks like this is going to be happening a lot with the things that Harry and Meghan worked on.
Yeah, and I think I'd need a lot more proof before I start thinking that the Cambridges are swooping in on projects or anything. It just seems like this is part of their job, is that they have to front the projects that their foundation is involved in.
You would hope that they would keep HeadFit going and give credit to Harry rather than just pretend it never existed and starting up their own mental health app for the armed forces and acting like Harry had never worked on anything similar.
And I think if you have a good opinion of Harry, part of that may well be that his commitment to his causes and how much he believes in them. And I'd hope that would mean that he would be happy to see these endeavours being taken forward to fruition with or without his involvement. He's involved in these things for the people it's going to help rather than for himself. Speaking of being head fit, though, it seems, and I'm delighted to announce this, that Camilla is fit for work again. That's right, the Duchess of Cornwall herself is out of isolation and just in time for her 15th wedding anniversary with Prince Charles.
Before she could celebrate, though, she had some work to do. as president of the Royal Voluntary Service, she made a call to an 85-year-old woman called Doris Winfield, who lives alone and has spent the last 2 weeks self-isolating alone. And she was just delighted to receive a call from Camilla, as you would be, to hear that deep baritone rolling down the phone at you.
Oh God, I can't even imagine.
The Telegraph had some quotes from a Clarence House spokesperson who said that Camilla and Doris talked about how much they love video calls. Camilla was probably recommending House Party to Doris.
She's on commission.
And that they miss their families and that they love losing themselves in an Agatha Christie novel.
I identify with that so much. I love House Party and I love Agatha Christie.
I would love to talk to Camilla about Agatha Christie.
Just about books at all.
We'll have more on that in a moment. But we should talk about her bookshelves first, because we got an incredible photo of Camilla in her office at Burke Hall. I have to say, I am loving all of these photos of the royals working from home.
I love that they didn't bother to clear hers up at all.
It's so different from... Obviously, Kate and Will's were like super pristine desks that looked almost like stock images because there was so little on them. And
Read into that what you will.
And Charles's was... The desk was pretty much clear other than that big red box and his books propping up his tablet.
He had to get his camera angle right.
But Camilla's is a mess, which is great.
I mean, she's been living there for the last 2 weeks.
You've got these shopping bags, empty delivery boxes, bubble wrap, all this stuff scattered over the floor. The desk is all cluttered with papers and her blotter and flowers and all kinds of stuff. And then the bookshelves are like teeming with books and tchotchkes and framed photographs and all kinds of stuff. Much like our own.
Yeah. It was like looking in a mirror, honestly. She had some lovely vibrant flowers as well, much like Charles. They like to keep their spirits up.
But let's go through some of our particular points of interest. So what I loved, and which has been edited out in some versions of the photo, is on her desk she has a greeting card that says Queen Bee on the back, which is so funny. And it still has the price sticker on, this really large price sticker for £3.
It was so funny that no one noticed that before they released this image. It's like Starbucks cups in Game of Thrones.
It's so funny. There's also, I love, right behind her head, there is a sign that shows a red squirrel and it reads, "Welcome to the Nut House." That is just amazing. Of course, Camilla has a sign that says "Welcome to the Nut House."
Yeah.
She probably chuckles to herself every time she sees it.
She probably mutters it under her breath.
It was probably a gift from one of her kids or grandkids. As well as that, there are some paper cutouts of the royal family on the top right shelf. And then in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see a red ball thrower, one of those things people have for their dogs. That's cute.
Yeah. She's got like loads of photos of those dogs and horses, grandkids and various children as well. And some very interesting books on the shelf. She's got Harry Potter and Casual Vacancy.
Yeah, she's a real JK fan.
She's got some Peter James thrillers alongside H is for Hawk by Helen Macdonald, which is a good pairing.
And The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, which we have on our bookshelf as well, but which I haven't read yet, but now I will, inspired by Camilla. It's just such a variety. You know, you've got non-fiction, you've got literary fiction, you've got crime, you've got fantasy, children's, all kinds of stuff here. But we'll get on to Camilla's interests in books a little bit later. Charles, of course, is tremendously literary too, as we were reminded this week when he recited an extract from the poem Tintern Abbey for the 250th anniversary of William Wordsworth's birthday on Radio 4's Today programme, which Tom just lets him lull to sleep every night.
I just put my headphones in and drift off.
He does have a very good reading voice.
I mean, they both would, right? And Camilla would be great to read you a bedtime story.
And together, reunited at last, they took a new picture to mark their 15th wedding anniversary.
It was so cute. them sitting on a bench together outside Burke Hall with Camilla's dogs on their lap. They're Jack Russell's Bluebell and Beth.
Yeah, I love that Clarence House wrote in the caption that they are the Duchess's dogs. And it made me think, like, does Charles have any interaction with these dogs? Like, the way he was holding the dog looked like maybe he'd never held a dog before. And these outfits were really good. I felt like after we saw those pictures of Will and Kate working from home in the suits, that this was like, okay, this is like much closer to actual working from home clothes. I mean, Charles was still in like a blazer, but he had his cords on, these kind of almost like slipper-like loafers with the tassel, and Camilla with her jumper and her pink shirt and her straight jeans. They look great.
They looked like so much like my own grandparents. But unlike my grandparents, they shared a video montage of photos and clips of them over the years, which was very sweet. But the best thing about it was the music that was playing underneath.
Yeah, I watched it without the sound on, and I was like, oh, that was cute. And then I hit the sound, and I was like, whoa, this is such a different vibe with the music on.
So funny.
So definitely listen to it if you haven't already. But speaking of social media pics,
we got the Corona Creeper.
Prince Andrew re-emerged this week on Instagram with some new photos shared, not by him, not by Fergie, but by Fergie's assistant, Antonia Marshall. A carousel with a full 10 shots of Andrew, some of them also with Fergie.
But not that many of them.
Mostly him, though. Yeah, he was the star of the show. They were at Royal Lodge, where they lived together in Windsor, and they were packing care packages for a hospice in Windsor. And Antonia Marshall wrote in the caption, "The York family are a wonderful and steadfast unit, and through this crisis are continually helping others. So proud of them all." And she tagged Eugenie and stuff as well. But I was just, like, bewildered by all of this.
You can see how this came up as a suggestion that, like, oh, we'll get the assistant to share some photos and, you know, maybe Andrew could be in some of them, and this is like a way of showing the public that he's doing his penance by helping out and things. But then clearly Andrew's fucking ego took over and he's in every single one doing virtually the same thing.
Because Fergie has been posting like a ton of photos recently. She's been doing a lot of these care packages with Eugenie as well. And like basically every day or a few times a day you get a new Instagram post from Fergie. So I was surprised that she didn't share these photos herself. But then I wondered, did they think that would be way too showy or too obvious? And that to go through her assistant would maybe look like a more understated play? Because she has less than 1,000 followers herself.
Yeah.
But then, obviously it's going to be picked up, because these are the first pictures we've seen of Andrew in nearly 3 months, I think. So, Andrew is wearing an open-necked burgundy shirt. Far too open for my liking, to be honest. With glasses, but no gloves, no face mask. All the better to get that nice clear shot of him. No mistake over who it could be. He is packing cupcakes and toiletries into these hot pink gift bags. So Fergie.
Virus or no virus, I don't want a cupcake touched by his bare hands.
I was just thinking, like, how terrible it would be to be in a hospice, to be sick with coronavirus, or have your friends are sick, anything, and you get these lovely cupcakes and you're so excited to eat a cupcake, and then you hear, and that was a gift from Prince Andrew. That's the last thing you need.
Yeah.
But the Daily Mail ran one of the pictures that showed Andrew with, I think it's the chief executive of the hospice, and they wrote in the story that the hospice had tweeted, "We are all deeply honoured by your kindness, Sarah. Our nursing team are simply thrilled and loving the gorgeous products." They did tweet this, though, on the 7th of April, and they were talking about Baylis and Harding toiletries when they talked about the products. But Andrew had joined Fergie on the 9th of April, where they were using Florist toiletries, not Baylis and Harding. So I just thought possibly it was a different day.
Yeah.
And that maybe the hospice weren't actually thrilled to, like, simply thrilled to see Andrew.
Yeah.
And making it sound like they were was possibly a bit misleading.
Oh, and it just makes me think of him as, you know, even slimier and sneakier than I already thought him to be.
Well, Tom Bower, the royal biographer, he wrote a biography of Prince Charles, which is pretty good actually. He said, "It is rather pathetic that he exploits the coronavirus to creep back into the spotlight. He should do good works, but not seek to win kudos by posting trashy photos. If only they would both accept that their only public duty is to remain invisible from the public." Like, strong words, but totally true.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, if Eugenie and Beatrice and Fergie are doing these care packages all the time, then it would make sense that Andrew would help them, but we don't need to see him doing it. We don't need to know that he did it.
No way. In fact, I would much rather not know. I wish I didn't know, Maeve. Wish you hadn't told me.
It just undermines the whole project and makes it seem like they're doing it for very cynical reasons rather than genuinely generous reasons.
But someone who shouldn't be staying invisible is the Queen.
Yes, we were very pleased to see her finally giving her televised address last Sunday as we were finishing up last week's episode. She was beamed out on all the main British TV networks, sharing her coronavirus message.
So she's said to have written it herself with the help of her private secretary, Edward Young, and in consultation with number 10 Downing Street.
It was 4 minutes long and very, very British, in my opinion. She, again, did not use the word coronavirus or COVID-19, although she did refer to this disease. So it was filmed in Windsor Castle. We know there was one cameraman there who was covered in personal protective gear, and just the two of them were filming in the room. The room was very spare. There weren't any of the photos or ornaments to pull focus from her speech. She looked very much like herself, exactly as you would imagine the Queen would look, with the pearls, the brooch, the lipstick, all of that. And I thought she struck like a very careful tone. She obviously didn't want to sound like moralizing. We talked about this a little bit last week, but when she said,
"I also want to thank those of you who are staying at home, thereby helping to protect the vulnerable and sparing many families the pain already felt by those who have lost loved ones. Together we are tackling this disease, and I want to reassure you that if we remain united and resolute, then we will overcome it."
So she's not like lecturing people or telling anybody what to do, but I felt like she was giving a very parental kind of nudge to make choices that they will be able to take pride in the years to come.
Yeah, it was good, and I was surprised that she was very inclusive, because she had a reference to people of all faiths and of none, which you might expect the people of all faiths, but and of none I thought was like, oh, hello, Richard Dawkins.
And on Palm Sunday, of all days.
She invoked our national spirit. Of course she did. No British person can really go a day without invoking our national spirit. But she appealed to the British people and our sense of ourselves as a self-disciplined, good-humoured and quietly resolute people with a very proud history.
Yeah, and she even reminded everyone watching that she herself is living history. I thought this was a nice touch where she recalled her very first broadcast she had made in 1940 with her sister Princess Margaret when she was Princess Elizabeth. She was only 14 years old, and the two of them had shared words of courage to evacuated children of the Commonwealth. I thought that in itself was very reassuring to people in reminding them of all that she has lived through and survived, and kind of helps to give people a perspective on something that can feel very overwhelming and new and inescapable, to remind them she's been through it all.
She had a very strong ending. She said,
"We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again."
The job was to build unity, a lot of that use of the inclusive we. She was trying to inspire hope in people. That reference at the end, "we will meet again," referred to a Vera Lynn song, the wartime song.
We'll meet again. I don't know where. I don't know when.
Thanks, Tom.
It's okay.
But again, like a super British song, like everything about it was so British. And I feel like we have very different responses to it, you and I, because while you were saying, like you just said, about how she appealed to British people's sense of themselves, obviously that is gonna hit home for so many people. But if you're not British, you are a little bit like, okay guys, like chill out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not into this idea of national spirit at all. I have to say I was like unexpectedly moved by the speech. I don't think of myself as someone who's swayed by the royals, and certainly not by the Queen very often, if at all. But when she had the picture of her and Margaret giving the speech when they were kids, and then seeing her now and all that time, that did actually give me goosebumps. I have nothing more to add on that.
Well, that's the whole point. So it worked. She did her job. It did feel like she was really striking that balance between ceremony and feeling, and that obviously is her whole job, and she was doing her job very well in this case. But if you're not British, I feel like it is a little bit cold.
Yeah.
And certainly I was thinking of it compared to the Irish president, Michael D. Higgins' addresses about coronavirus, and they're so different in tone to the Queen's. But, you know, I feel like this is what the Queen has to offer. You know, she's not going to do a big emotional thing like Michael D. or...
She's not got the range. She kind of has one successful mode of speaking, which is this.
But it was a huge hit. Like, it was pretty much unanimously well received. She was on the cover of all the front pages. She was trending on social media. I saw so many people sharing the pictures and the clips and the quotes everywhere. People who I would never have thought would be suckers for this kind of stuff. And they were totally, like, comforted by it, like you.
Yeah, I mean, I think she was really helped by the clips that they put in of frontline workers. I think that added a lot to what she was saying, because, you know, in previous speeches you've been able to see out of the window, for example, but she was very much in one room inside, cut off from the rest of the country visually. So I think if it had stayed on her for that whole thing, it would have lost a lot of the impact that it ended up having.
I think as well, it was very different from what you've been hearing from Boris Johnson or Michael Gove or Dominic Raab, any of the British political leaders talking about the virus have a very different approach to it than she did. And in The Guardian this week, Marina Hyde, the columnist, wrote about that, and how so much of the political conversation around coronavirus has been about this imaginary war, whereas the Queen took a quite different tack. So Marina Hyde wrote that this was not the oratory we associate with soaring wartime speeches or martial inspiration. The callback to her first broadcast was particularly affecting. For all the Second World War metaphors we've had over the past month, this was the first time the parallel was made explicitly with what war really means for the vast, vast majority who don't regard it as a chance to be the hero of popular stereotype and earn their glorious mentions and dispatches. For them, for us, war is a state of fear, of seeing our children frightened, of being the victims of immense disruption, and of being separated or sundered from many of those we love.
Yeah, and this coming from a woman who we hadn't seen in weeks because she had been in total isolation, that you could believe her, I think, when she talked about not seeing family, for example. It did hit home for me.
One of our listeners, Brian, asked us if we would talk about the other times the Queen has given these rare televised addresses outside of the Christmas message. So we've been looking back on those. They're quite interesting. So there's 3 of them. We'll go from the first one. So this was in 1991. In February of that year, British troops had taken part in the First Gulf War, and the Queen made a short address in support of the armed forces. So this was very short. It was less than a minute. I think it was like 45 seconds or something. It is so interesting to compare that to the one that she made most recently, because she is wearing a very similar outfit.
Yeah.
She has a green dress on, very similar shade of green, that bright, almost turquoise green. She has the 3-strand pearls. She has a brooch on. She has red lipstick on. She's sitting at a desk and there's no pictures or anything around her. The imagery is so interesting as like bookends on her televised addresses. We'll get to the other 2 in a moment, but they also mirror each other. But what did you think about the actual content of this speech?
Well, I mean, having just talked about this kind of wartime rhetoric, this is literally what this is. This is like belief in our armed forces, prayer for military success. She says, I hope that we can unite in praying that their success will be as swift as it is certain. This is a general at the beginning of battle saying that victory is certain.
Yeah, very much like a rallying cry. She also shares her hopes that their goals can be achieved with the minimum loss of life. And she ends by saying, then may the true reward of their courage be granted, a just and lasting peace. It's very sober, obviously, given the topic at hand, but I thought it was also quite like compassionate, or maybe a little warmer than some of her later speeches. Although, as is a through line of all of them, she has this kind of teleprompter temperament where she is so stiff in reading off the teleprompter that oftentimes the meaning of her words is drained by the static expression on her face.
And her eyes flickering from one side to the other as she reads it off, But again, there's no framed pictures around her. It's just focusing directly on her sitting at the desk and her message.
Which makes it so different from then her next speech in 1997 after Diana's death.
Yeah, I feel like this is the one that people are most likely to be familiar with.
Certainly we are, because of Peter Morgan's film The Queen, which reenacts this whole speech with Helen Mirren. It's so good. To give some context around it, I'm sure most of you are familiar anyway, but the royal family had been heavily criticised for appearing unmoved by the loss of Diana and by the enormous public response to her death. You had headlines on the front pages of the tabloid media saying, like, show us you care, your people are suffering, speak to us, ma'am, where is the Queen, where is her flag? These very kind of intense headlines, at the same time as the Queen was staying in Balmoral rather than returning to London, and obviously the flag, which usually flies when the Queen is at residence at the palace, was not flying, and people had wanted to see the flag flying at half-mast.
The Queen's press secretary ended up making a very rare and unexpected statement. The royal family have been hurt by suggestions that they are indifferent to the country's sorrow at the tragic death of the Princess of Wales. The princess was a much-loved national figure, but she was also a mother whose sons miss her deeply. Prince William and Prince Harry themselves want to be with their father and grandparents at this time in their quiet haven of Balmoral. As their grandmother, the Queen is helping the princes to come to terms with their loss.
I was so surprised by this. I'd never heard that they'd made this statement until I was looking up this week. But it's so defensive.
Yeah.
And so stern. And to be making this sort of excuse explaining why the Queen hasn't been in London.
And saying that they're hurt by you, the people, saying these things about them. Be nice to them.
Yeah, it's so unusual to see them respond to criticism at all. And especially in this very personal way. The press secretary also said that the Queen would be making a televised address, which she did the day before Diana's funeral. So you might have seen the images of her doing a walkabout outside Buckingham Palace when she was meeting some of the mourners that were there and looking at the floral tributes and the messages they'd left outside the palace. And then she made her speech live.
I have to say that the Peter Morgan film, The Queen, really informs how I think of her when I'm watching this, because you really do feel like she's been forced to make this speech. She looks like she's at gunpoint, virtually. This speech, even today, is being described as one that came by the worst sort of public demand and to calm down those who had become angry. Is it fact? Is it myth? We don't know. This idea that we, the people, forced the Queen to make this speech. And it seems that the royal family were more concerned with the public turning against the royals than with the fact that Diana was dead. So they didn't want to add any fuel to this kind of anti-monarchist sentiment that was growing.
Which is, of course, totally coloured in by the Peter Morgan film.
Yeah, exactly.
But even when you're watching it, she is very stiff. She almost seems to be gritting her teeth at times. Again, she has that very unfeeling, almost robotic way of reading off the teleprompter in that monotone. You do get the sense that she wants to get it over with, but it's so interesting the contrast between what she's saying and how she says it. And there are some very personal moments in the actual speech. One of the things that stood out to me was when she said,
"We have all been trying in our different ways to cope. It is not easy to express a sense of loss, since the initial shock is often succeeded by a mixture of other feelings: disbelief, incomprehension, anger, and concern for those who remain. We have all felt those emotions in these last few days. So what I say to you now, as your queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart."
There's so much to unpack in there. Like, she does seem to be acknowledging the tension between the royal family and the public in terms of that incomprehension and anger at Diana's death, and also at the lack of response from the royal family.
Pointing out that there's different ways to cope is very much trying to stop people from judging their response to grief or their form of grieving. But I felt like the phrase "I say from my heart" really just didn't connect for me with, like you said, the tone of what she's saying. It also seemed to me that she was just telling us this is from her heart. There was nothing in her mannerism or warmth of her voice that showed me that what she was saying was something that she actually felt, because she does give quite personal insight into her feelings about Diana.
First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness. I admired and respected her for her energy and commitment to others, and especially for her devotion to her 2 boys. This week at Balmoral, we have all been trying to help William and Harry come to terms with the devastating loss that they and the rest of us have suffered.
Like you were saying, these are like remarkably personal terms, but I feel like they sound a lot better on paper than when she's actually saying them out loud. It did strike me as well when she says in good times and bad, she is acknowledging that there were a lot of bad times between the royals and Diana. And as well as that, then when she's talking about this week at Balmoral, she is kind of offering an indirect excuse why she wasn't in London. I thought this was interesting because throughout she does use that very inclusive we, like we were talking about, in a way of building that unity in her speech. But in this sense, when she says we have all been trying to help William and Harry, that's very exclusive we, the family, not we, the public.
Yeah.
And setting that boundary. She does refer to Diana and Will and Harry by their first names, but calls Charles Prince Charles.
Yeah, that was very odd.
But I think ultimately it was such a portrait of the stiff upper lip, very conservative display, as you would expect from the Queen. As we were saying before, this is what she has to offer. She's not going to give you more than this. I think they obviously tried to temper that a little bit in the setting and the staging of this speech. So as we were saying with the Gulf War speech in 1991 and then this one last week where she was sitting at a desk, in this case it's very different because she's standing up near the balcony in the palace overlooking the crowds outside. And you can see, it's live footage, you can see all the people out there moving around, you can hear them. There is this low-level hum the whole time while she's speaking. So it is in a way kind of showing her being like of the people and acknowledging the huge public response.
She has a very standard royal mourning outfit of a black dress with 3-strand pearls and a brooch, and also a pair of glasses, which really surprised me because I absolutely don't associate the Queen with wearing glasses.
Yeah, and I feel like they create such a barrier.
Yeah.
Because the way that she's positioned, the lighting means that the lines of the glasses are casting these shadows on her face and almost like distorting her face. So her expressions are harder to read.
Yeah, I definitely would have recommended contacts if I'd been part of setting this up.
And you can almost see the teleprompter in the glasses as well. But one thing we saw when we were reading about this speech was a paper by the Romanian academic Marina Cristianu-Rotaru, who studied this speech, and she points out the Queen's blinking. So this speech is 3 minutes and 7 seconds long. The Queen blinks approximately 118 times, which would be 39 times a minute, and that's 260% more per minute than the average individual in any kind of everyday situation. And that is fascinating to me. It's so noticeable when you go back and watch it again that she is constantly blinking. But it is kind of the only sign that she is feeling something that is very indicative of the pressure that she's under. The rest of her seems so dignified, so composed, and like her face is so still, but her eyes are just blinking like wild.
Gone mad, yeah. Obviously the stakes were so much higher for this speech than possibly for any of the other ones. Certainly in terms of the effect on the royal family themselves. The response was a good deal more mixed than her coronavirus address. According to reports from the time, many were moved by it, but others felt that it was too little, too late.
Yeah, and then the next day, obviously, at Diana's funeral, her brother, Earl Spencer, gave that very passionate eulogy that was so different from what the Queen had said. You might remember when he said, "We, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative way in which you were steering these two exceptional young men so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned." Even the language there is so much more poetic than what the Queen was saying, and many people took it as this almost open rebellion that he was advocating against the royals. The Guardian's contemporaneous report pointed out that, like his dead sister, and unlike the Windsors, he knows the power of word and gesture and symbol.
Which is a very interesting thing to say.
I mean, of course the Guardian are saying that. They're the most Republican newspaper, but it's so interesting seeing how the Queen's speeches are received over time.
The final speech that we want to talk about was her speech in 2002 following the death of her mother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. So she recorded this message thanking people for their tributes and their sympathy following her passing. It was a live broadcast again. It was from Windsor Castle. She's seated by a window and you can see the Long Walk outside, which is where Harry and Meghan zoomed up in a carriage on their wedding day. And she wore, again, this royal mourning outfit of black dress with pearls and silver brooch, and, again, a pair of glasses. It's interesting to compare this speech, I think, to the Diana one. Obviously, they're both talking about losing a loved one, or at least a family member. In Diana's speech, she said,
"I share in your determination to cherish her memory."
So very much the Queen taking part in this larger public mourning of Diana. But after her mother's death, understandably, it's much more like she is sharing her grief with the people and thanking them for their support.
Ever since my beloved mother died over a week ago, I have been deeply moved by the outpouring of affection which has accompanied her death. My family and I always knew what she meant for the people of this country, and the special place she occupied in the hearts of so many here, in the Commonwealth, and in other parts of the world. But the extent of the tribute that huge numbers of you have paid my mother in the last few days has been overwhelming. I have drawn great comfort from so many individual acts of kindness and respect.
Despite talking about grief, though, she does sound almost upbeat or certainly very engaged. And, you know, it's obviously not an emotional speech, but her tone is warmer and she speaks more naturally and with confidence, which is understandable given it's her own mother she's talking about, and they were very close.
She once again reminds us that she has a heart.
I thank you also from my heart for the love you gave her during her life and the honour you now give her in death.
But she uses this line at the end of the speech rather than at the beginning, and personally I did feel like the speech had done the work to get me to believe that. This was my favourite of the 4 crisis speeches. I felt like it was the most successful. I felt like I was getting the truest glimpse of the Queen.
Of course, given we're talking so much about the Queen's speeches, we had to choose one of them for our quote of the week. So we have picked the closing line from her message on coronavirus.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
A very nice bit of writing, and it was short and to the point and very memorable. I enjoyed reading in The Guardian, the TV critic Nancy Banks Smith called her parting words a pop song because of that nod to Vera Lynn. And she quoted Noel Coward, who said how potent cheap music is. It goes non-stop to the heart. We'll Meet Again comes trailing golden associations of an impossible war we managed to win, and Vera Lynn, who is apparently indestructible, and blue skies and blue birds. Simple, memorable, cheerful, and chin up. It is also conveniently very popular at funerals.
It was definitely a really good line and a really good way to end that speech. It's very difficult to do these kind of sign-offs in a way that feels powerful but also natural. What about Fit for a Queen?
Well, it's gotta be the Queen, right?
Yeah.
I think this was a perfect choice, what she wore for her speech. The green, such an uplifting colour. We talked about this when Meghan wore quite a similar shade for the Commonwealth Service for her last royal engagement. You know, it's the colour of spring and of nature. It's very calming but also hopeful and energising. In Meghan's case, we were saying that we thought that shade of green could signify new beginnings, but for the Queen, it seems like it's more likely to be more of the healing properties, or possibly also a nod to the scrubs worn by NHS workers.
But you can stop reading messages into things right this second, because there is no cryptic message in the brooch.
People do love reading into her choice of brooches, but the blogger, the court jeweler, assured us that there was no secret message there. Overall, though, like, it was meant to be a very familiar uniform that we see the Queen wearing at all her daytime engagements, that it's very reassuring to see her looking exactly as you expect her to look, and as if there's nothing extraordinary going on. I thought as well with the lipstick, it was interesting. I was reading in the Telegraph that during the Second World War, lipstick was one of the only items not to be rationed because the colour of it was seen to be a morale booster, and the Telegraph suggests that the orange lipstick is kind of a nod to that.
And she wasn't wearing glasses.
So. No, thank God. What about first in line? Who's it going to be? Is it the Queen?
She's a queen. She's my queen of reading. It's Camilla Parker Bowles. She gave us a reading list this week via an exclusive for the Press and Journal, which is Burke Hall's local paper.
Buy a paper, you guys. Support local journalism. That's what Camilla's doing, and that's what we should all be doing.
Absolutely. She's quoted as saying, Ernest Hemingway famously once said, "There is no friend as loyal as a book. In these challenging times when we are isolated from the ones we love, many of us are finding comfort in reading, to fire up our imaginations, to take us on journeys, and to make us laugh. With that in mind, here is a list of my dearest friends."
I loved this.
Oh my God, I was so excited about it. I saw this on their Instagram first this morning, and I couldn't contain my excitement.
As you'll see from the comment that Airheads Pod left on the Clarence Outpost. Well, it reminded me of when Barack Obama does his books of the year. You know how he's been made that like a little tradition that he does?
Yeah.
I mean, let's make this tradition from Camilla, please.
Oh, yes.
Because this is such a good idea and such a good use of their platform on social media. I mean, I have no doubt that if Sussex Royal was still around, that Meghan would have seized this opportunity to start the Sussex Royal Book Club.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have that, but Camilla really pulled it out of the bag with this one. So she's recommended 9 books and given a little comment on each of them.
It's like a Goodreads review for each one.
Yeah. The first one is Restless by William Boyd, of which she says, a wartime thriller featuring a resourceful woman in grave danger. A great read. And then, for variety, we're straight into A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This is a wonderful story of romantic and familial love set against the violence of the French Revolution. It is one of my favourite books by Charles Dickens, and in my humble opinion, one of his best.
Bloody hell, well, there we go.
Take that opinion to heart, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, I might actually read some Dickens. She also recommends the Simon Sorella series by Susan Hill, saying Simon Sorella, Susan Hill's brilliant detective, is the central character in the great writer's crime fiction novels, which that seems like a very basic comment. I'm like, maybe she hasn't read them. I'm sure she has. The next one I was really excited to see on because I'd actually read it. Not bragging or anything. But it was The Secret Commonwealth by Philip Pullman, about which she says, I have enjoyed every book that Philip Pullman has written and have followed Lyra through all her trials. This book, the second in the trilogy, is no exception, as we immerse ourselves in this fantasy's mystical adventures. Storytelling at its best.
Such high praise. I mean, I know Philip Pullman isn't much of a monarchist, but I love that she's recommending it and just casually referring to Lyra.
Yeah, I know. I mean, slightly weird to be recommending like the second book in a series, but, you know, maybe that will encourage everyone to go back to the
People
book
did
one.
like the second book more than the Book of Dust, though, didn't they?
I won't give my opinion on it.
I am very intrigued by her next choice, which is the Cazalet or Cazalet Chronicles by Elizabeth Jane Howard. And this is the book that she's pictured reading in the photo that they shared along with this post. A multi-generational saga by this brilliant author of a British family before, during and after World War II. If I were sent to a desert island with one book, this would be my choice. And she's actually talked about these books before, back in 2013, and there was a little bit of like debate around whether it was too lowbrow for Camilla to be reading, that she should be reading something more literary. So I love that she is sticking by this one, and I am going to read it.
She also recommends A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. A wonderful book which gives the reader an understanding of life in post-revolution Moscow through the eyes of a Russian aristocrat sentenced to life in Moscow's Metropole Hotel.
That was a popular book. I remember people being crazy about that one. I was also intrigued by the next one, The Red Notebook by Antoine Laurent. A clever, funny novel, a masterpiece of Parisian perfection. Bloody hell. That is one 5-star review, huh?
Yeah, I actually really want to read that one. Also on the list is The Architect's Apprentice by Elif Shafak, a magical, colourful tale set during the height of the Ottoman Empire. Well, Charles is really into his architecture, so maybe he considers himself the architect's apprentice.
And then the final pick is a personal one, Travels on My Elephant by Mark Shand, of which he says, my late brother's tale of his love affair with Tara, an Asian elephant, on their journey across India. It always brings a tear to my eye. That's quite sweet. I wish he hadn't said his love affair with the elephant, but
yeah,
I do think it was a nice little personal note to end it on. And I am really hoping that all of these books shoot up the bestseller lists and we get to see the Duchess effect in books. Oh, please let us know if you've read any of these books, or if you want to read any of these books, or if you're going to read any of these books, because we definitely want to dive into Camilla's faves.
Yeah, we want to know which ones to read first so that we can talk to you about them.
Or if any of them are shit, tell us as well.
And I won't believe you.
But speaking of books, there's a book that a lot of people have talked to us about, American Royals by Catherine McGee, which we've had sitting on the bookshelf for like 6 months, but we haven't read. And we thought that this might be a good time to read it and maybe do an episode about it in a few weeks. I feel like maybe 3 weeks is probably long enough for both of us to read it.
Yeah.
So the May 4th episode is going to be our little American Royals Airheads Book Club episode, if you want to read it before then and join us.
Which means that Archwell will probably be launched on May 2nd with like full branding and a list of events. But yes, we've got that to look forward to. We'll also be watching the Vice documentary about Meghan this week and talking about it on next week's episode.
You know, we've had a lot of messages about that as well, but we will finally get around to it and talk about it next week. But let us know if there's anything else you are interested in hearing about, if there's any throwback stuff you want to talk about. This stuff with the Queen's speech was a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be, so if you have any other recommendations, we'd love to hear them. But in the meantime, you can find us on Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest at AirheadsPod, and on Facebook at Airheads.
If you liked the episode, please give us a 5-star review and tell a friend.
And we hope all of you are staying safe and healthy and doing well, and have a good week. We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
We'll meet again. I don't know where. I don't know when.